Hey everybody, this is Dr. Josh Funk. I'm here with another episode of the Strength and Knowledge podcast, and I'm very, very happy to bring to you Jared Maynard. He is a physiotherapist that currently works at Depth Training and Physiotherapy in Canada, and in addition to being a part of the Clinical Athlete co-founding team, as well as a newly rebranded venture in which he is calling Unbreakable Strength Online. But welcome, Jared.
Thanks so much, Josh. Really happy to be here, man.
Happy to have you. And I think, a big thing for a lot of the people who don't know you, and we've been talking more and more about it, but what has been your path to the profession?
All right. So the slightly truncated version is that coming out of high school, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, I wanted to be a physician. And then I got a little clearer on what that all entailed as far as time and schooling, and was just honest that my heart wasn't in it enough to probably make it through. So started thinking about professions that still would give me what I wanted, which was not working at a desk solely throughout the day. Wanted to work with people, wanted to do something in the healthcare field, and wanted to feel like I was genuinely making an impact in people's lives for the better. So physiotherapy ended up being one of those fields. And then I did my undergrad in kinesiology at McMaster University. And that gave me some time to kind of shadow, figure out more, what the field looked like and what working in private practice, which is kind of where I thought I wanted to go, what that would look like. So made up my mind about third year in the program that I was going to go for PT. Applied, didn't get in the first year. So it gave me a year to work as a kinesiologist at a physio clinic, save up some money, and also gain some experience. Applied the next year, got into one place, and then I've been practicing since 2015, I think. So, that's one part of it. In addition to that, I've been involved with sports since late elementary school. It was martial arts first, then football, and then I started lifting weights just to get bigger and stronger. And that developed into a real love of training. And so I knew I wanted to do something that could bring my passion for physical activity and for training, but still help me to impact people on that one-to-one level. So that led me to the door of the profession, and it's been a pretty fun and interesting ride since.
Yeah, and for you, blending the two, and I think it's something we're talking a lot more about nowadays, but is the blend between the rehabilitation and performance world. You, with John Flagg and Quinn, co-founded Clinical Athlete, largely centered around some of the same principles. Both of you, or I should say all three of you, really liking, having an affinity to getting under the bar, so to speak. So talk to me a little bit just about really how was that founded and what your journey has kind of been like to this point, obviously with an amazing event that was hosted last weekend.
That's right. So yeah, Clinical Athlete has really been a defining feature of my clinical career and personal development too. So Quinn Hennick and actually Derek Sawyer, they founded the organization back in, it would have been 2013, I think, give or take around there. I could be wrong, actually, it might have been 2015, because I think we're celebrating 5 years. So it must have been 2015. So they started the organization as a means to connect athletes with healthcare providers who could speak the same language and could help athletes get back to what they wanted. An old example that still holds true is they wanted you as an athlete, whoever we're talking to, let's say you were squatting 400 pounds and your knee hurt. You could go to anybody who's part of that Clinical Athlete directory as a provider and say, hey, my knee hurts when I squat 400 pounds. And the response wouldn't be, well, just don't do that. The response would instead be, okay, this matters to you. Let's dig in. Let's figure out how we can get you back to what you care about. So Quinn and Derek, they've put in countless hours and just a whole bunch of effort to build this up. And there's been some phenomenal grassroots support. I stumbled on them, I think due to one of Quinn's old videos with Juggernaut Training Systems when I was a really new grad out of school. And I thought, hey, this feels like what I want to do. This felt like he was blending that strength and performance side of things with that clinical care, which is, what I wanted to do. And maybe I hadn't visualized it in that particular way. Got in contact with Quinn, applied to be part of the forum, applied to be a clinical athlete provider. And I'll never forget, Quinn called me. We set up a Skype call. I just come home from the gym. I was still in my singlet. I had chalk on my back, and we hopped on the phone, and we were just talking about general philosophies when it comes to treatment, making sure that I was in line with what Clinical Athlete was about. And I was, so I hopped on as a provider. And then shorter version of the rest of it, it would have been 2017. My wife and I had moved from one city to another. We were expecting our first children. We were expecting twin girls, which was all sorts of fun. So at the new clinic, I was trying to generate some interest, get people in the door. So I put together a presentation on pain science. And I was also working with Quinn myself through remote consults to help me rehab a hamstring issue. So at the end of one of the calls, I said, hey man, I put this together for my clinic. Could this be useful for Clinical Athlete? And he said, send it over and let me take a look. And he liked it. He's like, do you want to do a webinar? And I said, sure. So hopped on, did the webinar. The AV quality was garbage. So tried that a couple of times, still didn't pan out. But Derek, who's helping me with that, he asked if I wanted to come on board and help set up webinars, contact presenters and get that whole thing rolling. And that was my first foot in the door. And it grew from there. So now I'm the continuing education coordinator. I've got my hands in all of our projects, and I'm really blessed to be part of this core team of Quinn, Derek, John, myself. We have our first intern, Taylor Allen Flanick. And you mentioned the event we had last weekend, the CALU Summit, which is the tag team event with the Level Up initiative. Went fantastically. And I'll speak for myself, but I think it's probably applicable to the team. I'm riding pretty high off the momentum from that event. So we're pouring that into some of these projects that we're working on building out for Clinical Athlete. We've got our eyes set on next year for the next summit, and we're gonna do some cool stuff, man.
I'm excited for it. And I know, and I'll give you guys a plug here as well. We have signed up all of our different locations, so staff has access to your guys' platform. I've seen it diversify over the years from a lot more than just a forum into journal club, into workshops, webinars. It's a great place to go in and network. We've actually gotten connected with people who now are a part of our team. So very fortunate for that as well. And to be quite honest, being a Clinical Athlete provider, for anybody out there wondering, it actually will send you business. We've had people literally plug in and say, oh, hey, I found you on the Clinical Athlete website. This seems like a great place for me to do rehab. So just very, very multifactorial in terms of all the different ways I think you guys are diversifying and being impactful for the providers that are part of the community. But getting back to the CALU Summit, something that was originally planned for in-person. Was very, very excited. I was like, all right, we're going up to Boston, right? We're going to bring a team of us. And then all of a sudden, COVID hits. And I don't want to necessarily use the P word that we all have to use this year, but things changed and you guys had to roll out a new plan. What was that like?
Yeah, it was a bit heartbreaking actually, at first anyway, because we had started planning this over a year ago. It would have been late June, early July of 2019 that Zach Gabor of Level Up hit up. I think it was John Flagg. He might have tossed the original idea too, and the teams came together. So we had things in place, and then obviously COVID hit. So I think we took a week or two just to probably mourn the loss and try to figure out what we were going to do, because it was granted, this was early April. We had no idea how things were going to unfold, and we had this set for September. So we figured we got to do something. And it was one of our team members, Cedric Haddad. He had said that this probably ends up allowing us to do the summit even more in line than, or with our joint community values than potentially the in-person event, just because we were able to take the message and the content to that many more people. Not to say that we won't or didn't want to do in person. Obviously we did, and we still plan to, but we just got to work on figuring out how to deliver it online and still keep this really interpersonal, interactive feel to it, where it didn't feel like you were just going to be talked at for 3 days straight. We wanted something different. Wanted people to be excited to come through, to get super high quality information. And we locked that in with all the presenters who agreed to be a part of it. And special thanks to all of our sponsors, Rehab to Perform being absolutely top of list there. So we just started figuring out how to deliver on that. And, we were able to pull it off. We had some cool technological discoveries that allowed us to bring the vision to life. And the most gratifying thing is just hearing from people after the fact, telling us that it felt like the best conference I've ever been at. And it was super fun and exciting, and they learned a ton, and they didn't feel the same sort of con ed fatigue that they would otherwise expect at the end of a conference. So that was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things was, right, the breakout rooms. I mean, the opportunity to put people in small groups, almost case study, have people discuss certain scenarios. I think, I just love that concept and that idea, allowing you to take some of the more lecture-oriented material, some of the clinical side of things, and then, hey, how can we implement with these very same people that we look up to, helping us troubleshoot? Who kind of spearheaded that? And what was that like, kind of structuring the organization and flow of that kind of environment, knowing that, hey, sometimes when you let people kind of break out in all different directions, things might go a little bit unpredictable.
Yeah. Credit for the idea has to go to Zach and Steph from Level Up. Zach, pardon me, as I'm pretty positive that you know, and probably many of your listeners would know, Zach is a big ideas guy. He's super energetic, and he brought a lot to the team. He put that on the table, if memory serves, first. And then it was a collaborative effort to figure out how we were going to keep things sufficiently reined in so it felt productive. Things were kind of on tracks a little bit, but it wasn't super scripted. It didn't feel stuffy. It felt like it was organic, and people had the freedom to say what they wanted and express different opinions and have that fit in really seamlessly within the overall structure of the conference over 3 days, but then within the presentation and this particular topic, and within the topic, exercise prescription or communication. And, I should also say the entire reason we wanted to do this in the first place was to have people, particularly students and new grads, walk away from the conference with immediately actionable things that would give them the confidence to navigate the uncertainty that we can't ever really get rid of with clinical practice. But on Monday, with their next client they saw, they would have these things to start to use, and that would give them more confidence. They would be more excited to see their clients, and then therefore deliver better care down the road.
Yeah, and it makes me think of just a conversation that I've had with interns in our office more and more. But what they should be getting from the experience is not necessarily what to think, but more of understand how others might think that have been in their shoes, and maybe you're at a higher level or at least further down the path. But ideally thinking about what their clinical thinking process is going to look like, how they can think critically, how they can come to their own solutions. Sometimes knowing that, there's a lot of different roads to Rome. And it really, at the end of the day, all that matters is that person's outcomes.
I totally agree there. And I think I was having a conversation with one of the student PTs who attended the summit. She and I ended up talking afterwards, and funny enough, I'm starting to be her coach now, which is cool. But she was talking about how it can be very discouraging, especially for students or new grads, although not limited to those two, categories, to think about, what does the research say about X, Y, or Z intervention? What do we really know? What does it mean? Does anything matter? And to kind of get sucked into that vortex. And we're always navigating the gray area of clinical practice. And I told her, and I still think this applies to probably all of us, even without uncertainty, if we can start from a place of knowing that our intention is genuinely to help and to do right by the people in front of us, and we start by establishing a very genuine connection with them, understanding what they want, what their needs are, and then just beginning to craft a plan collaboratively with them as we guide the path, even if we don't have all the answers, and even if we get tossed curveballs, and especially if we're equipped with some of this information from people like the speakers that we had at the summit, we're going to be able to put it together and learn along the way and just get better and serve our communities better over time.
I think one of the key things that you just said there was almost something about getting comfortable with uncertainty. And it's come up more and more and more, but something about transitioning to being an expert and getting comfortable with uncertainty. Maybe people are a little bit uncomfortable with being called an expert or even thinking themselves as an expert, but you take it to the other end of the spectrum, and sometimes people with the most certainty really have a lot to lose. But then when you talk about transitioning that to the consumer or the client or patient that's in front of you, sometimes your uncertainty might come off the wrong way.
Yeah.
How do you recommend making sure that that communication as to the complexity of what's going on doesn't also put you in a situation where you're losing the trust of that person?
Totally. I think you pegged that one right on the head. So a line that stuck with me for years comes from Derek Miles, who's now with Barbell Medicine, which is always confident, never sure. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that statement, because you're right. If we come across as being too uncertain, these people who have come in the door because they inherently think that we are experts, or we at least have the ability to help them, they're going to start to question that decision, and they're probably not going to think that continuing on with whatever the plan is the right thing for them, even if it ends up being a good plan, right? Because there's that whole interpersonal psychological element that it's always present as we're working with other people. So I think, we certainly have to be honest. If we don't know something, don't pretend like we know. But I think that people also respect hearing that answer. If a client asks you a question and you don't know, say, you know what, that's a fantastic question. I'm not sure, but I know some places where I can go look for the answer. I'm going to circle back around to this. I'll tell you what I find, or I'll hit up my friend or my colleague who might have some more information, and I'll bring that back to us. Does that sound good to you? I think people respect that honesty, because then they feel they can trust you more. I also think that this is something that I think you and I talked about on a call earlier in April or something like that. We swapped a bunch of book recommendations, and I can't remember if this was part of it, but Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss is one of my favorite books that I've ever read. I read it earlier this year. And I think that's just one example of resources that would allow us to become better at this communication thing, and expressing empathy, in labeling emotions, in trying to put ideas on the table and convince someone to see it our way without being confrontational. But really what I'm trying to get at is, if we can do a better job at, to borrow Level Up's phrase, a better job at humaning and just connecting with people in a genuine way and knowing what they care about, what they want out of the whole process, it allows us to step forward together in line with the patient and just make decisions that they're probably going to feel better about and will likely get them where they want to go.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think I definitely love that book. The book Crucial Conversations still always comes to mind.
Yep.
Especially when I think about like framing conversations, intros, leading people maybe in a certain direction, getting them to a comfortable point where you can start to introduce some of these more challenging situations. In the beginning, I'm thinking like, how do I make sure that they know that I've heard them before then getting to a point where I'm maybe introducing things where they're hearing a little bit of uncertainty on my end, but they at least know that when we get to that point, that they've been well heard. I've thought things out. I've kind of gone in this a little bit maybe more systematic way of approaching the information before I even come with a response. So yeah, I mean, I think it's critical. And I think, for you, you're really in a unique spot in that you're delivering this information for people who are coming to the place in which you work at as a physio, and then also for people that are seeking you out more from a, let's say, a performance side in terms of specializing with that barbell athlete that you're working with. So do you have any recommendations for the different voices or approaches that you might have to have in each of those places?
Yeah. I think at its core, it still comes down to the same principles, but the application ends up being different. So for someone who's coming in, say general population, who's not necessarily a competitive athlete, but maybe their back hurts and it limits how much they can enjoy their time with their family, or it limits their work, that sort of thing. The words that I'm using and the approach, or what our plan looks like, is almost certainly going to be different than, say, the competitive powerlifter who comes to me, who's got his or her eye on nationals at the end of the year, and they've got this particular issue with their squat. I'm still going to care about making sure that they know that I care about them individually. And at the time that I spend with them in the time that I spend with them, they are my priority. I want to make sure that they know that I've heard what they want out of this whole process. I think being able to speak a common language ends up being important, which is one of the areas that I think organizations like Clinical Athlete help people a whole lot, as far as, to use the old phrase, bridging the gap between performance and rehab. Because if we can understand the demands of a sport, and if we can use some terminology that's relevant to that sport and just sort of work it into our conversation just casually. I think on the part of the client, there's going to be maybe a light bulb moment where they'll recognize, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. And they'll inherently, I think, trust us more as we suggest that, all right, here's what I'm seeing as the next step. Here's how we need to get you from point A to B to C all the way to Q, so you can get back to hitting 600-pound squats on the platform at nationals. Or here's what we need to do so that your back is not the limiting factor. You can pick up your grandkids and you can go to work and finish a shift and not be in pain. So genuine connection, making sure that they understand that you care about them, and being able to speak a common language. And I think we can help out with that language piece by just broadening our knowledge bases and seeking out resources that help to make those words, those terminologies, and those ideas more accessible so that we can just plug and play as we need to.
Yeah. I mean, I look at that and, you've got, external, you got resources. Internally, it's the conversations that you have. Is there anything that you're also doing to maintain connectivity with people, say, just to check in with them between sessions? I'll use an example. We're using email drip campaigns a lot more that are tied to diagnosis codes at the office. Is there anything else that you're finding that works for you to support your clients?
Yeah. With the clinic that I'm at, we do have a few campaigns here or there. I'll send people emails, especially if maybe I tag them either in my computer or on my mind, just because, for whatever reason, say I want to make sure that they feel decent after a given session, or I haven't seen them in a little bit, want to make sure they're doing fine. It's a little less formal there, but with what I'm doing with Unbreakable Strength, it's much more baked into the system, because I find that accessibility on their part gives them more confidence, where they know that if something comes up or they have a comment or a question, they can fire that to me. I'm going to get back to them in a certain period of time. And that helps them to be excited about the next steps and feel confident stepping into the gym. I also have a check-in process where twice a week, I'll make sure I send everyone an email and touch base just to make sure the week's going fine, and to see if there are any tweaks we need to make on the fly. At the end of the week, I'll review the whole training week and just make sure that we're clear on what the objective for the next week is, what the next block is going to look like, just so that everyone feels, again, at the end of it, I want people to feel like they're cared for, because I think that's really one of our base wants and desires, and that they feel like they're heard, and that they know that if and as their needs or circumstances shift, together we're going to be able to handle that and take the next right step forward for them.
And when you talk about taking the right step and really making sure that they're in a situation where they feel cared for and connected to you, I think, I just think about the current landscape of everything being online. And while I know that you set out to do Unbreakable Strength online, it was not something that you thought was also going to probably have a lot of other online options in terms of what's being presented in front of the people that you're working with. Are there any things that you're doing to be considerate or to be mindful of all of the other things that people are going through right now?
Yeah, definitely trying to be mindful of all the different things that could play into people's individual situations. So whenever I'm talking to somebody, say we hop on a call, I'll frame that conversation early on after I get to know them a little bit and say, hey, my job during this call is to dig in and find out where you are right now, where you've been, what issues you're facing, so that at the end of it, I can give you my honest opinion about whether I'm the perfect fit for you and whether we can work together and get you where you want to go. And if I tell them that if I'm not, I like to make sure everybody's time spent on the phone with me feels like it was well spent. So if I'm not the person for them, I'll make sure I do my damnedest to hook them up with another person or another resource that is. And let's say we start working together. If things change along the way, my priority is that relationship first and foremost. Even as a business, and I'm certain that you would agree with this too, it's making sure that the relationship with that person is prioritized, so that even if it ends up being a situation where things change and we might have to put things on pause, or it's just less optimal than we both would like, I want to make sure that I do right by that person. So we'll have a conversation and hopefully I've earned enough trust from them for them to tell me what's going on and what they think we should do. I'll give them my 2 cents, and then together we'll decide on what that step is. And, sometimes it ends up being the case where the right step for them is not what I might want personally, or what might be best for my business, but it's not about me at the end of the day. It's about the people that I'm working with and doing right by them.
I agree with you on that. I mean, I think for us, looking at the pivots, right, that we've all had to do over the past couple months, I mean, everything from putting people on, honestly, pro bono payment schedules, waiving things as a result of people either getting laid off or furloughed, or being in a situation where people aren't comfortable with in-person activity. So us having to do a little bit more virtual than normal. So you're right. I mean, the connectivity at the end of the day was, what mattered during those times where people were at their lowest. When I look at like just the thing that, we've been dealing with a lot is, we're an insurance payment model with regards to in-person PT. And when we go virtual, there's a significant cut there. And it wasn't ever a matter of, dollars and cents. Well, we're spending time here and it's not necessarily a good ROI. The only ROI that mattered was the impact that we were having on that person, knowing that if we took care of them during their greatest time of need, they were going to be very, very appreciative for that. But not only that, but just in a better place. I mean, we had people who literally were having like psychological breakdowns.
Right.
We had more tears in probably a 4 to 6 week period in the clinic than I would ever like to have for the remainder of Rehab to Perform. So,
I believe that. Yeah.
You talk about all the different dynamics going on over the past couple months, and it can be challenging. So, I mean, for you, just on the end of kind of where I was going a little bit with that too, was with Zoom fatigue and online fatigue. I mean, it is a thing. I don't think I'm the only one that's having it. I've heard it used a couple other situations, but for you, I mean, has it popped up at all? What are you doing to be creative there?
Yeah. On my part or for the client's part, or both?
Both.
Okay. It's a good question. I should check in with my clients and see how they're doing with it so far. And again, it could be me reading things wrong. I think people in general.
Or you're just so entertaining. You know what I mean?
Well, I try,
so entertaining and engaging that people are just like, I just can't wait, even after I've been on Zoom for 8 hours today.
My ego just inflated. Thanks for that, Josh. Appreciate it. So let's shift to me then. So You're right. I've had to be mindful, certainly more mindful of the time that is necessary for delivering my services and being put into my business and all that sort of stuff, and balancing my responsibilities between the clinic, between my company, between clinical athlete, and then my family and all that sort of stuff. And what that also meant in terms of energy. So trying to set up my weekly schedule in a way that still allowed me to have the time needed to do the work that I have to do and deliver on all of my promises to my clients on time consistently, because consistency is really one of my big things that I shoot for across the board, in person and online. But one other thing that I'm working on, I'm not great at yet, but will continue to get better at, is having systems in place to truly unplug. So I've got a time lock safe coming to me so I can put my phone in there, turn the dial, press the button, and I just have no way to get to my phone for however long I set the dial for. It's one of the challenges of having online businesses or organizations where it's great that we get to connect with people all the time, but it's also tough because the access is always there. And as someone who cares about what you're doing, that takes its toll. So it's almost this paradox, I think, where to be ready to go and to deliver your best consistently day in and day out, you need to make sure that you've got time blocked off for yourself and you've got ways to protect that time. So in that protected time, I'm spending more time with my family. Our youngest daughter is 4 months old. So that's pretty cool. I'm also training as a powerlifter myself. No competitions on the horizon right now. Dealing with a couple of issues here or there that I got to work through, which makes it comes with the territory, but training is really one of my grounding activities. And if that's in place and I'm honoring my time there, everything else seems to flow a little easier.
You just gave me anxiety when you said that your phone was going to go into a time lock box. I mean, I don't like, I don't think that I have a problem with my phone. I've
Right.
gotten tremendously better. And to be
Yeah.
quite honest, the past 2 months, I've made a concerted effort to have less screen time. But
Nice.
the thought of putting it in a box that I maybe can't get until tomorrow morning at 9, just,
Yeah.
I start getting the itch. You know what I
I'm with
mean?
you. Oh, dude, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. And it's, I've been driven to this option. I mean, I can keep going as I am right now, and I get some good work done, even if I have my phone like across the room or outside the room if I really need to get into some deep work. But just knowing in the back of my mind that I can get to it if I really want to, when I start to get a little
Yeah.
bored or the work gets a little bit tough, that's been my downfall. So taking it out of my hands,
Yeah.
I know I'm gonna mess up, and just leaving the time lock box, I'm gonna get nervous too. I can tell you that right now. But I'm excited for the work I'll be able to get done now.
Yeah, no, I have similar strategies at night. Usually I'll try to put airplane mode on
Yeah.
sometime before 9 o'clock, where it's just, I'm done.
Yeah.
The alarm is set for the following morning. Admittedly, my morning time period is where I really kind of get back to balance.
Yeah.
I work out every morning, try to get up before the sun.
Nice.
I knock out email, and I know people don't really think that's a restful thing to do, but the more that I can do email uninhibited and I can just dive in while my mind is fresh, the less I have to worry about one of the things that I probably hate the most throughout the rest of the day. So if I knock those two things out in the beginning of the day, I typically can start the day with a clear mind and I'm moving forward, and I'm able to dive into. Right now, to be quite honest, I'm back into patient care 2 days a week. So we've had to kind of build up a new clinic after the bottom dropped out with COVID, and building it back up. We're bringing our final team member back on November 2nd, which, that's our final person on furlough. And I'm super excited just to be able to say that we're bringing them back.
Great.
But yeah, the deep work and the distractions. And I don't know if you've checked it out yet, but Social Dilemma is unbelievable. You might never look at your phone ever again, or especially like notifications and some of the social networks that we use.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. My boss at the clinic mentioned that yesterday, also because I mentioned the time lock safe. Because isn't there a skit involving that in there?
There is. Yeah, pretty much. And a young lady smashes the time lock safe no less than a minute after mom puts all the phones in there. So hopefully you'll have a little bit more success than that young lady. But
fingers crossed. I hope so.
I'm optimistic for you, man. You know?
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
But hey, I mean, diving into Unbreakable Strength, I mean, that was something that kind of shifted course after something that you had initially started. You're building it more and more. I've seen the content online. I've seen testimonials. I've seen how-to guides. I mean, you're really going all into this. Dare we say it's a side hustle before maybe it becomes less of a side hustle? But talk to me a little bit about what that's been like for you, what you've realized, and really the direction that you hope to take it.
Totally. So yeah, for now, I mean, it's almost like a middle hustle now. Like I was telling you before we started recording, I've been doing online coaching under a different name for a couple of years. And, I intended to keep it as a side hustle. I had a very small roster of just like 5 athletes, give or take. And then COVID hit, and I got to give a shout out to Frank Benedetto and John Flagg over at the Honey Badger Project. Frank is the founder of the Honey Badger Project, and I jumped on with that. For anyone not familiar, it's business coaching specifically for health and fitness professionals, for people who want to create mission-driven businesses. And everyone's got different niches. There are some people who want to go after powerlifters like me. There are people who want to go after cyclists. There are people who are offering online physical therapy care for a bunch of other folks. And it's joining the Honey Badger Project. I keep saying this because it continues to be true. Easily in my top 3 best career decisions I've ever made after getting into PT and after joining Clinical Athlete. So that's really given me not only clarity of vision through a series of a few exercises as far as where I want my life to be in the next 1 to 3 years, even considering the effects of COVID actually helped to catalyze that vision, thankfully. And then it's given me the theoretical and practical tools to start to work the process. So it's been really uncomfortable, to be honest with you, because I'm naturally introverted. I hated the idea of putting myself out there more on social media. And it's still something that I'm working on in terms of reworking my relationship with social media. So it ends up being a tool. Frank likes to use the analogy of a hammer or something, where if he has a job to get done and needs a hammer, he'll go get the hammer, he'll do the job, and I'll put the hammer back. And there's no attachment to that hammer. Now, that's obviously easier to say than to do, especially when talking about social media. And we can get down the rabbit hole as far as why that's difficult. I won't right now, but that's something that I'm working on. And it's really this, man, it's happened a lot quicker than I figured, which is good. But being able to provide value for people and use social media among other avenues just to reach them and to connect with them, to begin a conversation and hopefully attract people who are finding value in the information that I'm putting out. And then if they are in fact finding that value, and if I'm having conversations with people through various means, then I'm able to see if they're in a situation where I can help them. And really that's the core of it. My mission is to bring, I'll say this, the very, very short version of my own story is that I was in a very dark spot going through PT school, and I'm very neurotic by nature. I was trying to compete in bodybuilding, and while I very much love bodybuilding as a sport, it wasn't for me, just because I developed some really poor relationships with food. I wasn't diagnosed, but I'm pretty confident I could have been diagnosed as having depression, and pretty nasty downward spiral. And then powerlifting caught my eye, and it was this idea of being able to live and die by the effort that I put into training and the efforts going towards the sport. I played football in high school. I loved the team sport environment, and it really helped to shape me. But I was really drawn to that individual sport as well in powerlifting. So I started training for that. And really, Josh, powerlifting and strength training generally over the past 6 years, it's really formed me into the man that I am today. It's formed me into the husband and the father that I am, as well as the clinician and the coach that I am. And it's taught me a whole heck of a lot, from endurance and perseverance, how to deal with failure, how to get back up, how to recognize when something isn't working and discern when it's just a case of just got to keep chipping away at it, or when you got to change tactics. And it's also been a grounding practice for me, day in or week in and week out. Because it's had such a profound impact on me, I'm fanatical about bringing that same transformative experience to people. And I want to help people not just get stronger in the gym, but to feel more confident and to have more energy to give at work and to their families and their loved ones, and to have more courage so that next time in their pitch meeting, they can feel a bit more comfortable on the table, or they've got the courage to step up on the platform and go for that third attempt that, is really scary in their minds, but they're going to do it anyway. I think seeing that and having some hand in that process, it's one of the greatest things that I could hope for. I absolutely love it. So going back to Unbreakable, it's been a wild ride so far. It's going to keep getting wilder, because I've actually, starting next week, taken away a day in the clinic so that I can put more time and effort into Unbreakable. So the next 12 weeks, that'll be my sprint. And there's some big things in the works here.
Good for you, man. That's got to feel good. And I'm going to take a couple of steps back there, actually, and just praise you on your just transparency there with football and mental health being something that recently came up for Dak Prescott. Yeah. And obviously some conversations surrounding a certain commentator that had some what I would call off the cuff, not really, probably, I would say tone deaf remarks surrounding mental health, especially for somebody who lost a brother. Are there certain things that you have either seen in some of the younger clinicians, or potentially even people who have come through the doors to work with you, where you've been able to pick up on certain things that you would recommend for people out there?
Yeah, I think in general, I'm seeing trends, pardon me, of younger clinicians being more aware of the necessity of looking for, or rather, yeah, looking for, let me say this, of asking questions just to try to ascertain where their clients are maybe in terms of mental health, in terms of other things that they're struggling with. I think this applies generally to rehab professionals, coaches, just service providers in general. If we can, to borrow Dan Berardi, or not Dan Berardi, John Berardi's term, if we can know a lot about a little and a little about a lot, that allows us to pick up on instances where maybe someone could use the help of another service provider, whether it's mental health or something else like that. And if we can expand our networks to have those people to refer our clients to, I think that just allows us to do more in terms of serving our clients. And for me, as far as the people that I work with, this comes back to the communication piece, I think, because of course we don't want to overstep our bounds as far as scopes of practice as professionals. And there's a finesse for sure, at least I think, to having these conversations with people and maybe or gently leading into conversations about asking, hey, how are you doing? I'm noticing these things. Is there anything you want to talk to me about? I've got an open ear. Just sort of leaving the door ajar and inviting them to come in if they want to. And then again, if it's something that we can refer them or something that we can help with directly, just by being a genuine, caring person while still providing the professional services that we've been signed on to provide. I think that's what people value that, more and more as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think just appreciating the fact that you have been open enough, right, or I should say comfortable enough to be this open with me. I'll be transparent. Like my first 2 to 3 years as a business owner, I didn't necessarily have maybe down moments, but I was living on adrenaline and anxiety. I was literally running my life. Yeah. And to be quite honest, my advice on the weekend was the work hard, and then on the week I'm going to go play hard. Yeah. Right? I'm going to go hard at work, working 80 hours a week, and I'm going to go hard and, things like Sunday scaries and just trying to get your shit back together before you start the week again it's a real thing. And it's totally stuff that I recommend everybody just making sure that, as you mentioned earlier, I'm not going to go get a lockbox. I don't think quite to that level.
Not yet. One day, maybe.
Commitment, I'll say. But I think for me, just finally getting to a point where I was like, am I actually doing things to get myself back to baseline? We talk about muscular activity. The most efficient muscles, or the muscles that typically you're going to get the best output from, are the ones that can go to a full relaxed state, right? Yeah. I mean, the more that they can relax, the more they can forcefully contract. And I view that very similarly to the mental and emotional status of myself, and ideally others as well. So it's something I think that we're all getting much more comfortable speaking, and I just appreciate you kind of taking the initiative there to run with that. But for people that you're working with, and obviously you're passionate about powerlifting, at what point would you consider some entry points into having a discussion about getting somebody into powerlifting?
Yeah. Oh, one of my favorite topics. I kind of feel them out. Depends on their situation and my level of rapport with them. There's a client that I'm working with in the clinic, and she came in, she's an avid gym goer. And I picked up on some vibes early on that she didn't consider herself a powerlifter, but she'd be pretty easy to sell on powerlifting. And so it was just simply a question of like, you're pretty strong. Like, you like training. You ever thought about powerlifting? And just kind of a nonchalant, like, doors ajar, we can come in and talk about it if you want. And she was all about it. So right now, her main priority is making sure she can keep training heavy while getting back into school. There are other people who have no interest whatsoever in considering themselves a powerlifter or training hard for the sport of powerlifting, but they might enjoy pushing themselves hard in the gym for the purpose of being able to play as much golf as they want, or play with their kids, or stuff like that. So as far as appropriate points to talk about it. I mean, I'm heavily biased, obviously, as a powerlifter and powerlifting coach. So as early as I can get away with it is my short answer, I guess. But it's usually, yeah, a question. And if I ask them, you ever thought about powerlifting? And they say, well, I'm not quite sure. There are some common answers too, like, I don't think I'm strong enough. I might push back gently a little bit, like, what is strong enough, or share my experience where I had that same thought, and talking to friends and other lifters, their regret was not starting sooner, and I think probably the most powerful thing that I try to do anyway is just go beyond the surface level of powerlifting and competing and all that, but talk about what people get from the whole experience of training and competing. It's that process of trying to be better than yourself, especially with a solo sport, solo sport like powerlifting. Sure, you're competing against other people on the platform, but from meet to meet or session to session, you're just trying to be a little bit better than yourself last time. It's a way to build up that grit and that mental fortitude, because you got to do some scary stuff with powerlifting. There are bars that just look really scary. It doesn't matter how many plates are on the bar. It matters relative to your experience, your strength levels. So being able to develop that courage to step up to it and give it a shot, and being able to have fun. And we say it a lot, I think, in the healthcare field, but learning to love the process. That applies to just about everything, but being able to learn to love the process for the things that we really care about, or that really will give us the long-term benefits that we want. I think that's a really powerful and important thing too.
I agree. And I think sometimes some of the biggest things that we can do is ideally sell outcomes, paint the picture, right? Tell them what to expect in the future, forecast for them a little bit. And they start to see a different version of themselves, right? It's you 2.0. This is what you 2.0 is going to look like. Whatever your brand is that you're rocking right now, it's going to look significantly different as a result of buying into these certain things. So I love that. Although I don't have the cool Canadian accent and I can't really say processes naturally. Yes, embrace the process. Learn to fall in love with it. And that's not a knock. Jared and I spoke at length about my love for Canada. I lived this summer in Canada, and I feel very, very strongly about just the people, the culture, the vibes that I got there in my summer there. So that's all love.
All you got to say is A at the end of a few sentences, you get honorary Canadian status.
Yeah, no, I had that, and I played some lacrosse in Minnesota, and I feel like Minnesota might as well have gone to Canada at some point too. But
it's further north than I am, so I'd agree.
Yeah, so, but hey, Jared, I really appreciate your time today. I think there's going to be just tons of things that people can take from this in a wide variety of different topics that relate to the field and the industry that we're in. Where can people best touch base with you and follow up on anything they heard today?
For sure. Yeah. Instagram and email are probably the two best places. So Instagram, it's Jared Maynard _PT. And then email for coaching is unbreakablestrengthonline@gmail.com. And anything related to clinical athlete, jared@clinicalathlete.com is the email to reach me at. And then you can check out Clinical Athlete, just @clinicalathlete on all the platforms. So I'd love to talk to anybody who felt like any of this resonated with them. If they've got questions about clinical practice, if they're thinking about powerlifting, or they are a powerlifter and just want to take it to the next level, hit me up. I'd love to know if I can help you.
Awesome. Jared, thanks for your time, man.
My pleasure, Josh. Thank you for the shot.